know, my name is Anamaria Baralt, and I'm in the Menendez family. So Lyle and Erik Menendez are my first cousins. Their parents were my aunt and uncle. My mother is Jose's oldest sister. So that's my relation to the case. And I grew up with Erik and Lyle. Erik and I are 3 months apart in age. Grew up in the same town, so I know them pretty well, and I'm in constant contact with them. And if you follow the case, you've probably seen my face out there being shoved in front of microphones. Thank you, Mark Garagos, for putting me in those incredibly awkward positions over and over again. So, yeah, thank you for
You
joining us.
you kind of have become the unofficial spokesperson.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, again, thank you, Mark Garagos.
thank you, Mark. There it
I did
goes.
not ask to be the spokesperson.
But
He
here,
really kind of threw me to the wolves one day.
but here you are. So, um, let's get into some of the questions that people had here. And if you have questions, of course, feel free to ask them. You can see the chat, I believe, too.
Yeah.
Feel free to ask them. But the first one somebody asked was, oh, where was I? Just lost it. I would like to know when the family accepted the fact that the abuse happened and that they were really telling the truth.
That's a different journey depending on the family member, right? So for some of us, and it largely was a generational difference.
I believe
So
that.
those of us that were, in with the younger people, and we knew Lyle and Erik so well, those are our peers. We were much quicker to fully accept that it had happened. Some of the older people that were very close to my aunt and uncle, I mean, it was really hidden. Like it wasn't like there are some members of the Andersons family who spent who lived at that house, right? And they talk about the hallway rule and like nobody could go, at night if Jose was in a bedroom with Lyle or Erik, that no one was allowed down the hallway, right? Those were not things that we on our side saw because we didn't spend the night there. And it didn't really even occur to me until I was much older, when looking back in my childhood, and I thought, Lyle and Erik spent the night at our house. Again, we grew up in the same town, like a million times, and not once did their parents let me spend the night at their house. And it just didn't occur to me to go until I was an adult and go, wow, that's really weird. So
That
as
yeah,
I
that's kind of telling.
Yeah, like that's weird. I have kids now. Like kids spend the night at each other's houses, particularly when you're cousins and you're close and you're in the same town, right?
Yeah.
Um, it just didn't occur to me to think it was weird at that time. And again, I was very close to Lyle and Erik. I believed it right away. There are some older members of the family that it took them longer, but they all do now. I mean, it's been a long time since everyone has come around, but for example, Milton Anderson, Kitty's brother, who just passed away, who was the one family member who was really fighting against this, he never came around. He never believed it. But there are dozens of us on the other side, of course.
So I'm gonna reword this next question because it kind of dovetails off that one, and I know that it's going to depend on the family member, but so I'm going to change the question is worded: did the family always support the boys, or did they change their views on the situation at some point? So I'm going to reword this to say: was there ever a time? Were there family members that supported them from day one of the arrest? And so forth, or did others have to come around later, or kind of what did that journey look like for some people?
I would say the bulk of the family supported them from day one, and testified for them in the trials, and were always in support of them, even if they didn't necessarily believe their story right away, and that took longer than again, not like last week, longer as in it may have
Yeah.
taken a year or two for them to fully accept it, but from day one supported them. And then of course there were, I mean, it's a huge family, so there were
Yeah.
members, who didn't support them right away, and that was their journey to go through. Uh,
And there's 20 of y'all right now that are supporting, right? The 20 that
yeah,
are
I
left.
think there's 24, 25 of us who have signed all of the documents to all of the governmental agencies. Yeah.
So one of the big things, and I think I told you this the other day when we were talking. So I feel like that generational divide is kind of a big issue with people when you talk about the Menendez brothers, talk about Eric and Lyle. There's really two extremes, right? Like, yes, they should be freed, or no, they should stay. What they did is horrible. They should stay in jail for the rest of their life. And there seems to be about that mid Gen X kind of line is when that shift happens.
Sure.
And so I guess what I don't want to ask this. What would you, given the fact that you have 24, 25 people in the family that are supporting the release, knowing what happened that to your aunt and uncle, what would you, if you could say something to those people, what would you say?
I would say that, to the general public who does not support them is the question, right? That's what you're asking.
That's probably a much easier way to word it than what I just did. Yeah.
To those people who are against them.
Thank you for
Um,
that.
yeah. Well, first of all, I think that the generational divide is real, partly because younger people have been raised with more awareness about trauma. They
Yeah.
have the They've been raised with the vocabulary of trauma. They have been raised understanding um, disorders and stress. I'm a Gen Xer, right? You don't
Yeah.
talk about feelings ever,
Yeah. I mean, I'm
ever as a
very
Gen
early millennial. I'm
Xer.
82, so I am very early millennials, which is pretty much yeah,
Yeah,
same thing.
right. So the younger generation understands so much more about trauma than the older generation. And then you add on to that the older generation lived through the narrative being served from the media that was so incredibly biased with that was, I mean, really just the talking points
Yeah.
of the prosecution for years. And the media was saturated. Every sitcom, every late night show. I mean, it was everywhere. The same narrative. They are entitled. They're spoiled. They did it for the money. Never any evidence to suggest that they did it for the money.
I,
And
yeah.
for somebody who knew them, I think the reason I believed them so quickly was because I did know them, and it was like I knew right away as soon as I found out that they did it. Like, oh, there had to be a real good reason. Like, and when they said what the reason was, I was like, that tracks because there was no way it would have happened otherwise.
I want to address real quick because a lot of people will say, "Yeah, your dog's very cute, by the way," as
Well,
he or she's poked their head in.
he's a real
Um,
a-hole, actually, but
well, he looks cute. That's his saving
he
grace.
does look cute. That's Chad.
This chat. Well, so I want to, for people who are watching, I kind of want to address and you can tell me if I'm off on this, but I don't think that I am. So people hear that like, oh, they did this, they were wealthy, they're entitled, they did this because they wanted their parents' money. Well, there's a couple things that I want to inform people on. First of all, they didn't inherit their parents' money. The money that they got were easy accounts that were easily accessible, or B, insurance policies. But the other thing is that spending they had access to money, but that's a trauma response. We know that now, that it wouldn't have been then. That this was the first time that they had true freedom, and they took it, and that's very common to go on things like spending sprees. If you have access to the funds to be able to do that, that is not uncommon because it's the first time you feel some form of control. Is that pretty much about right?
Well, first of all, I should say that as we were watching that in real time,
Yeah.
it was very clear that we were witnessing a trauma response, right? What we didn't really understand was the trauma behind it,
Yeah.
but it was very clear it was a trauma response. And I spend it with, by the way, I trauma shop also. Just nobody notices because
Me
I have like
too.
no money in my bank account. It's full. It's like no one is going, wow, she bought, two sweaters instead of one. It's not that.
There's no Porsches for you on your impulse buy list. That's what
Yeah,
Afterpay is for,
exactly.
by the way.
But at the same time, it's important to remember that these two people, Lyle and Erik, were never deprived of money. Like they weren't. The idea that they did this so that they could spend money. I mean, yeah, Lyle bought himself a Porsche. His father bought him an Alfa Romeo for his
Which is not a cheap
birthday
car.
when he got his license. It's not like oh, we finally have money. Now there are lots of psychologists that have weighed in on this particular behavior from them and the spending spree, and said actually you can really draw a direct line from spending the abuser's money, right? That this was a reaction to what they had endured. That it was a statement, right? Not because they were happy for the money. It was a.
You're still here. I see you. Do it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Sorry, it got quiet for a second. No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it looks. The thing is, back what people have to remember too. For people who haven't seen this or don't know, haven't followed it, or know very little, there were two trials, and in the first trial, if you see clips from it, they talk about the essay, right? And in the second trial, they didn't, and we're going to come back to that in a moment because somebody asked about how did OJ's trial impact their second trial, and I think that that's a good conversation to have. So don't let me forget. But I forgot where I was going with this. I'm having a moment, a brain fog moment. Well, I guess I can't remember. Let's just go with the OJ thing then.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know where I was going. It'll come back to me and I'll remember. But let's go to that. Oh yeah, I remember. In the 80s, in 1989 when this happened, in the early 90s, the internet began to exist. And it was not what it is now. And so my point to that is back then the mindset was boys couldn't be abused. The mindset was, trauma. The term PTSD didn't exist.
That's right.
And at the same time, whereas we could go right now, if you wanted to fake, being a victim of some type of abuse, you could go online and say, what are the symptoms of abuse? They didn't have that ability to do that. They wouldn't go to an encyclopedia Britannica and be able to look up that information. It just didn't exist. So my point to saying all of that is if you go back and you look at clips from the original trial where they're talking about the abuse, either they are the best actors you have ever seen with limited knowledge or they're telling the truth. And I tend to lean on the side of the latter.
Exactly. And,
Not even
and
lean.
even one of the, it wasn't just a cultural thing that boys couldn't be abused. I mean, the prosecutor said that men can't be raped. They don't have the right equipment. It's absurd.
Yeah.
Right. Can you imagine those words being said in a courtroom in 2025? That
Yeah.
would
That
never
judge would be
happen.
disbarred.
That
That lawyer would be
that's
disbarred.
right. That lawyer would be disbarred. And then you take something. So Leslie Abramson fought very hard to try and get battered women's syndrome, which at that time it was only battered women's syndrome, right? It was very new as a legal argument, as a psychological argument, and she would tried to get that admitted into the case. I think on the second trial, and it wasn't allowed, right? Battered women's syndrome did not become battered person syndrome in California until I think 2011 when they finally said, oh, actually, this is a gender neutral psychological event that men can have just as much trauma and have their brains altered just as much as any battered woman. And so I'm glad now that legislature is starting to catch up. We still have a long way to go, especially with that public perception of trauma and the effect that it has in the brain. Brain science has really come a long way. If anyone in your late live hasn't read The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel, you absolutely should. And it talks about that a lot. And so I'm happy to see that has evolved. But in those days, there was no understanding that they were um, that they had suffered trauma. In the second trial, as a reaction to OJ's trial, which was a huge embarrassment for California, for certainly for Los Angeles, the judge was like, "I'm not going to allow anything in here. I'm not going to allow any discussion of trauma." And so, if you don't do that, then you have to take away imperfect self-defense, and the jury was really left with no other choice than to do what they did.
Okay. So somebody's arguing with us saying that the abuse evidence was allowed in the second trial. Would you like to address that? Because I know that it wasn't.
Very little. So here's the thing. So Erik was allowed to testify to his about his abuse, but they weren't allowed to use imperfect self-defense or battered person syndrome. So they couldn't bring on experts to argue and corroborate what he was talking about. So essentially, it made it made his testimony irrelevant. It just couldn't be considered. There was no point. If you
It
take the
became hearsay.
manslaughter off, you know, if you take manslaughter away from from the jury instructions, well then it doesn't matter if they abused it. They already said they killed their parents, right? Then
You,
that's the end of the discussion.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you had talked about the O.J. Simpson trial, and I'll let you. I could probably take this one, but I'll let you do it. What you want to walk through how you feel that, or how that impact? I don't say how you feel, but how that did impact the second trial.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it. So I was in my
I remember the
20s.
O.J. really well. Yeah.
I'm very old. Yeah.
You're not that. First of all, you're not that much older than I am, and I remember the O.J. one very well. Did you know? Fun fact. So I live in Nashville, and in East Tennessee, in Pigeon Forge, there is a crime museum called Alcatraz East, and in that crime museum is the actual Bronco.
Really?
Mhm.
Wow. Very cool.
So they also have one of Ted Bundy's Beetles there, for just so you
Oh
know,
my gosh.
which is very creepy to be around. I don't like it; gives off bad vibes.
I'll bet it's really creepy. I'll bet you can just feel that. Oh,
You can feel it. It doesn't feel. Yeah, I wanted to get away from it as quickly as I could.
yeah, I bet. I bet. Yeah, so the OJ trial was a shock, right? It's the whole, trying on the glove, it doesn't fit, you must acquit. There were, and I don't want to express any sort of really personal opinion, but there seemed to be a collective consensus that OJ was probably guilty and that he got off. And
Well, he was found. He was found liable in the civil suit. So
he was found liable in a civil
wrongful
suit,
death.
but as far as the criminality in the and
Yeah.
that was later, that was years later. But so he was found, he was acquitted at his murder trial. 6 days later, our second trial began. 6 days. So it was so fresh. And Judge Weisberg, may he rest in peace, no longer with us, made a whole lot of judgments in that, as we set up for the second trial, that really worked against Erik and Lyle. I mean, it was streamlined. Of course, it wasn't televised, so there wasn't a whole lot of accountability of what was happening in the real world and what was happening as opposed to the first trial, where everyone got to see all of the testimonies and it was all in camera. Hey, Chad, do you think you could take your bone and go somewhere else? Come on, go on.
You
Sorry.
know the. I have dogs, and you know the answer is no. They cannot.
No, yeah, the answer is no. The
let's
answer is
let's. Somebody had asked this question a few times. It's one of the tougher questions, but you said you're okay with that. So they want to know basically why. What was their reasoning behind taking Kitty's life?
uh, first of all, Kitty was not. Uh, Kitty was in some ways as much of a victim, by the way, as they were from Jose, but she was not blameless in this. She had her own history of abuse with Lyle and Erik, uh, which Lyle testified to. She was complicit, and and I do want to be careful here because Lyle and Erik have never suggested that their actions were justified. Okay, they
Yeah,
have always maintained that they wish they had done something different in that
yeah,
day. That day, that they had made a different choice, that they had trusted authorities, that they had trusted a family member, that they had gone and sought help, or they had left, but they were so clouded and just completely unable to see past what was right in front of them. And when Erik found out that his mother had known the whole time, there was rage.
yeah.
And they honestly believed that their parents were conspiring against them.
Well, she didn't want to rock the boat because, and somebody said Kitty was no victim. And here's what I want people to understand too: is that two things can be true. You can be a victim and a
Yeah,
perpetrator.
that's right.
And I think Erik and Lyle are great examples of that. They're victims. Gypsy Rose is a great example of that. So, sorry, my dog's going crazy downstairs. I don't know if you can hear him, but if so, sorry.
I know it's okay. Um, yeah, you can be a victim as well as a perpetrator, and that was the case with Kitty. That she is not guiltless in this scenario. But even if you don't buy that, which that's fine. Please remember they have served 35 years. Most people who commit murder are out within 25. So they have been punished more than most people who have committed this crime.
Yeah.
So
If
they're
they were
they're not
tried
getting away
today,
with anything.
yeah, if they were tried today, they would have been out, what, a decade ago, at least?
Yeah,
So,
yes, at least because um, they were youthful offenders for one, and they most likely would have gotten manslaughter because of the imperfect self-defense.
yeah.
It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be imminent danger for imperfect self-defense. It has to be that they believed they were in danger, which they did.
So in the comments that I had earlier, and I kind of really want to bring this up because I think that this is something that we talked about the other day, and something that that myself and other people were trying to rectify, is the film Monsters, which is arguably very entertaining, but not necessarily the most factual. And I have one person, I don't know, hopefully they're in here, they can hear the answer to this, that was talking about the fact, asking questions based on that film or that series. And so I guess did you watch it yourself?
No,
No.
I watched like half of
I
the
don't blame
first
you.
episode, and I just couldn't stomach it.
The first episode's tough to get through. It really is.
Yeah,
But I've watched like 3 episodes, and I think I described you. They almost have the actor playing Lyle almost like a cartoon villain in
yeah.
the way that he acts, and so um, you obviously know. But even if you haven't seen it, you obviously know about it.
Yeah.
What would you? I guess as far as the way that was done versus like the other documentary that recently came out,
That was why I couldn't watch it. That's why I couldn't even get through the first episode. When they've got Lyle, you know, walking around like some rage fueled psychopath, and yelling at trick or treaters. I mean, that is so far from his personality. And not just now, but even then. I don't even remember ever hearing Lyle's voice raised, even when we were kids. Like that is so far from his personality. He is like really even tempered. So I don't know why. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what this satisfies as far as making a show. Why they need to make there be a bad brother, you know,
because
and
it's
turn him
entertainment.
into that.
It's
What's
like we
that?
were talking about with the Lifetime movie, the Gabby Petito. It's called the Gabby
Oh yes,
Petito story, and the only thing factual is things that were made public. And they started filming that before she was even, I think, before he was found for sure, but possibly before she was even found. And
that's crazy.
that's kind of the challenge that we have. And I think that with Eric and Lyle's case, obviously it's a very different scenario than Gabby Petito, but it's easy to make for entertainment value. It's easy to make them look. They can do a film that's if you watch the first episode, they made it gory. It
Yes,
was
I've
it
heard.
was unnecessarily gory,
Yeah,
and where you want to look away. And I think that's what Hollywood does, and I think that's kind of what people ask if I'm in favor of the release. Very much so. I've been in favor for a long time of their release. Yes, that's my stance. So, um, somebody asked another question that was really good. Okay, yeah. What are they? Well, 2 questions that they asked. So I'll give them both to you. You can answer them how you want. The first is, what do you feel their chances are as far as parole goes? And the other one is, what are they doing to prepare for their upcoming parole hearing?
So parole hearing. Actually, before I did this, I was talking to the parole lawyer and with the whole family. We had a big family Zoom. This is how we get together these days. It's really involved. So they've got a lot of work to do. So the first, it's like 5 hours per brother is this parole hearing, and it's mostly just them answering questions from the commissioners of the parole board uh, about everything, every part of their life, about everything in their crime. And, why did you do this? Why did you do that? How did this impact you? And so to prepare for that, they have to prepare a big packet. They essentially have to tell the story of their lives. They have to recount stories of their trauma. They have to prove that they understand what why did they. For example, people always ask, well, why didn't they leave the house? That's going to be addressed. They have to say why, what it was that kept them from leaving, why they made that decision, what could they have done, what have they learned from it, and then they talk about their rehabilitation as well. So then they start talking about the programming that they've done. It's just a huge process. So the question becomes then goes to the parole board. The question is, it's called suitability. Are they suitable for release? That's the way it is referred to in this process. And the parole board has to make a decision about whether they currently pose a risk. Okay. And if they say yes, great. Then that's pretty soon for them to be released. It still has to be signed off by the governor, and I'm not sure like the time lag of that, right? Or the parole board can say, well, you did get caught with a cell phone last November, so maybe rule
That'd be such a
following.
dumb reason, though.
It's so dumb, I can't even. It's even hard to say it with a straight face. But that is literally their only infraction.
Because those cell phones come in from the guards.
Yeah, no shit, right? But it is what it is, and it's a rule, and they care a lot apparently about cell phones in prison. So
I guess it's trying to show it's a rule follow thing. I guess, like, are you following the rules?
It is, hopefully they're going to have a lawyer there who's going to make some arguments, who's going to say, listen, we get it. The cell phones. There are people behind bars who use cell phones for criminal activity, right? Lyle and Erik they're not gangbangers. Their crime was not based on a criminal mind. Their crime was based on a life of trauma, right? They're using their cell phones to literally talk to their family.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. They're not ordering drugs or, making hits, that kind of thing. So,
which people do.
Which people do, yeah, for sure, right? So hopefully their only allowed one lawyer, will present convincing arguments, and the parole board will stay great. If they don't, the parole board might come back and say, okay, 3 years. That's the minimum delay. If they have no infractions, they can apply for an advance hearing after, I think, about a year or 18 months. I think 18 months.
Is Garagos the attorney that's arguing it?
He's not. They have a specialist that deals with it.
He would say it in a very colorful way.
And yeah, he's really fun to watch in court.
Oh, I know. I really hope that Laziza hooks him up to be able, because she was like, well, if I can't get him, who else would you want? I'm like, I said, I'm not picky, anybody who can kind of speak to what we're doing. I said, but he'd be really fun to have on. Like, he'd be,
oh yeah,
good. So, that's interesting. What is your gut feeling on how you think it's going to go? Or do you have a gut feeling at this point?
I really don't. I really don't. I'm fingers crossed, hoping for the best, but preparing for a little bit of a delay.
Is there a scenario where
I'll
they
be
would
pleasantly
let one
surprised
out?
if they get out.
All right, yeah. Cautiously optimistic, maybe?
Cautiously optimistic.
Is there a scenario where I guess there could be, where one of them gets out and the other doesn't?
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And they have different commissioners. So, they're not going to be in front of the same people. So different people have different perspectives. Different people have different priorities of what they think is important in finding suitability. So, yeah, that's very possible.
Yeah, I forget that. So for people who don't know, their trial was the first and second one both done this way, where there was really two trials going on in one courtroom? Or
Only
is this
the
the
first
second?
one.
This is the first one. So yeah, for those of y'all who don't know, there was two. Basically, Erik and Lyle had separate trials, but it was a lot of the same evidence. So they did two separate trials in the courtroom. And for those who don't know, the jury deadlocked for a month because they heard all the evidence, the experts regarding the abuse, and that's why they deadlocked, and that's why it became a mistrial. So if they had I feel like had the second jury been allowed to hear what the first one heard, it would probably have been a very different outcome.
Agreed.
So when they get out, I'm gonna be optimistic. I'm gonna put it out there, right? When they get out, with the parole, they probably have to stay in California for a while, right?
I don't have an answer to that either because
Okay,
those will be negotiated
gotcha.
during that process.
But what do they want to do? Because typically you have to get a job when you get out, and I just can't imagine like getting served coffee by Erik Menendez. So what? Like who's going to hire? Like what's kind of their plan there?
Their first, their first plan they keep saying is really that they just want to spend time with family, right?
Yeah.
With especially with my mom and their Aunt Joan, two elder people in the family. And then beyond that, I don't know what this will look like as far as employment goes, but they both really want to continue the work, the advocacy for victims of sexual abuse. Um, both of them really want to do work in that space. They both feel pretty strongly about criminal justice reform since they have been on the other end of that. And then Lyle, of course, has the Green Space project that he's hoping to take to other prisons.
I think that's awesome that he wants to work in those spaces and be an advocate, especially for recidivism. I've been practicing.
Yeah.
So I said it right the first time.
You did so good.
I did. It just
You.
rolled off. Thank you. And I will tell you, I don't know if he's in here or not today, but I told Dan, I was like, you should come on today and like talk for a minute. But we had talked about, I'll keep it very, very brief, but like, what it could be like to have somebody like you or even them on a team kind of advocating for these things, that could be, because the thing about them is they're not normal released inmates. They're very
Right.
infamous. But I think what's really good about their case, what's really interesting in this case, somebody had made a comment on a video I did a while ago talking about, well, if they get out, are you saying that we should go back and look at all of these old cases? And my answer is yes. You absolutely should. If there's claims of abuse and there's proof there, absolutely.
Yes.
The fact that they're so infamous is part of the reason why, the attention's there. And I feel like when you have that spotlight and you have the opportunity to use that spotlight for good, then you don't want to squander that. And I think that they very much will have that opportunity.
I agree. And I get a lot of those comments too, like, oh, so you believe that everybody should have a chance to get out? Yeah. Yeah, I do. I believe that uh, I believe that people can change. I believe in redemption. I believe in forgiveness. I believe people do the work and they do the programming and they really commit to making to living a life of service. Yes, I think they should get out.
The thing
Absolutely.
the thing about them too is, part of parole or part of rehabilitation, which they've done so many things for themselves and trying to better themselves and better, people who are entering prison life, leaving prison life, and they've done all of this without ever having the thought of getting out. They've done it on their own without ever thinking about getting out. And I think that speaks volumes as well. And the challenge that we have is we have a for-profit prison system primarily. And so the reoffender rate is very high because of that. But for them in particular, I hate to put it this way, but I'm just going to put it this way anyways. The people who they wanted to harm, they wanted to harm for a specific reason. For 2 decades of abuse between the two of them. That's not like the general public's not in danger.
Yeah, right.
Like they're not going to come out and like go on a killing spree. This was a very isolated incident for a very isolated reason.
Yeah, for two very nonviolent people.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not.
Yeah.
They never were.
Which, yeah, let's
Okay.
talk about that then for a second. Yeah, imagine going through a situation where you're not a violent person, you're a fairly easygoing person, and you go through such extreme abuse for so long to a point that you break, and this is what happens. Think
That's
about
right.
think about the type of abuse you've heard, or you know little bits and pieces if you go watch the old trial or what you've heard come out in news recently. But think about then how much more is there that we don't know.
That's right.
So when
Yeah.
you went over to the house outside, you did you ever see yourself any time where Jose, because obviously he was the issue. And one thing that I found really interesting for people who don't know this is apparently even the prosecuting attorney said that she couldn't find anybody to say anything nice about him, except for one secretary, which I would just take a wild guess and say she was probably having an affair with, um, probably, and so that's why she had something nice to say. Um, but nobody had anything, you know, anything nice to say about him. But um, did you ever notice anything when you went over there that kind of showed him being, I don't know, gruff or abusive or um,
Gruff, yes.
agitated?
Physical, yes. Sexual, no. But there,
Well,
that
yeah,
was yes, he was rough with them, with Kitty too. Yes, there was a lot of like grabbing, which my house was so peaceful, and
yeah,
my dad was so gentle that it was always jarring. It was always a little bit. It was an energy that I didn't have at home. That I would feel it was palpable in that house. Um, I was actually a little bit surprised to. I heard the prosecutor Pam Bazanich say that she couldn't find anyone to say anything nice about Jose because he could actually be very funny, and so I was a little bit surprised that she couldn't. But I think that people show different sides of themselves to different people in their lives.
yeah,
And so, my mother was his brother. And so I think that he maybe showed a little bit more charm when he was around us than other people didn't get to see.
yeah.
But he was scary and intense. He was scary. I was at the my mother tells a story that when I was young, I was 4 or 5, sitting at a breakfast table, and he was there, and my mother was there, and I was there, and I was apparently paralyzed with fear, and he
What?
looked at me and said to my mother, "What's wrong with her? What is she, retarded?" And my mother was like, "No, she's afraid of you. Like, you're the problem." You
Yeah,
know,
you're a 4-year-old.
that was he was that kind of a dick. You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's yeah. I thought the other thing that she said that was very interesting was I quickly realized the world was better off without Jose Menendez. I was like, damn, that's a statement.
yeah, yes,
So and even Dan, was very interesting about him. We'll get together where you can speak to him at some point. But he said because he works in that kind of industry. He does rockumentaries primarily for his day job. So he's come across people who knew him,
I know,
and most people don't have anything positive to say about him.
yeah,
So that's even this many years later, you
yeah.
know, people would do that. So now there's obviously a lot of misinformation and things floating out there. And what is something? Is there anything out there that people talk about, one or more things, um, that you'd really like to set the record straight on?
Well, we talked about the spending thing. That gets brought up to me a lot. We talked about why they didn't just leave.
Yeah,
That gets brought up to me a lot. Um, generally I I loved when that podcast came out from TMZ, which was them. They called in and they spoke to Harvey Levin and Mark because people could hear it from their voices.
yeah,
They could actually
it's
hear their
important.
stories and hear about the programs that they were passionate about, and because people still think that they're 18 and 21, or in their early 20s, like uh, from the
Oh
movies,
yeah,
and that they're grown men. They're in their 50s. They're very mature. They're very funny. They're very down to earth. Uh, I'm gonna relay a little story. I don't really like to talk for them,
yeah. I understand
but
that.
but I will. But I'll relay a little story. which was that, Erik told me that if he were given the choice today, we'll abolish life without parole as a sentence, but the condition would be that he would have to still stay in prison for the rest of his life. Or he could get out and life without parole would go on. He's like, I would stay. No question. I would stay. If I could go to sleep every
Wow.
night knowing that no other person would have to go through this hell of what life without parole is, with no hope at all, because it is so cruel. It's so cruel. So I think it says a lot about them, that the reason they're up for parole today, the reason they were resentenced, was because of decisions that they made long before anyone was watching, long before there was any hope of them being released, when nobody was watching, when there were no appeals to be made. Like, it was done. They were going to spend the rest of their lives in prison, and both of them, both separately at first because they were in different prisons,
Yeah.
and then together, but both together, both made those decisions in their lives separately, that they were going to, we're going to live our lives with purpose anyway. Lyle put together a program where he was mentoring people, young people, right, young inmates, headed to parole, knowing he was never going to do it himself, knowing he was never going to be afforded that opportunity, and he was doing it anyway. I mean, I don't know that I would make those same choices. I mean, it's just stunning. It is really stunning. So I really hope they get out.
Maybe their
I
way
think
of
they're going to make the
repentance.
world a better place.
Yeah, from the ashes of tragedy can come beautiful things. So, and I think that it's there. So here's a question. Somebody just says they criticize the show. Did they see the shows that? What? Well, so there's been a lot. Well, let me back this up a little bit. There's been a lot that Hollywood has done about you guys, or them, particularly
Oh,
your family.
so much. Yeah.
Have For the purpose of this discussion, first, have any of them ever reached out to y'all or the brothers specifically, outside of ones where they interviewed them and asked for like input or anything like that, or have they just mostly made them on their own?
Mostly made them on there. A couple of exceptions. Mostly made on their own. Yeah.
Okay, and then
Yeah. Monsters for sure. Yeah.
yeah, monsters. If you're not you and you don't you don't know. So here's the thing, real quick, about based on a true crime or based on a true story means. It means that they've got the names, they've got one or two things that are accurate in there, and it's the rest of it is all dramatized. Even the Gabby Petito story was based on a true story, and the only thing that's correct in that is the Moab footage, which was publicly available.
Yeah.
So, other than that, literally everything else was made up. People are asking about copyright. The issue with copywriting is you can't copyright a public event,
Right.
and when it's made, once it gets into the news. It's not, it's not yours anymore.
Right.
Even your name.
That's right. Yeah.
So
That's right.
that's how
Yeah,
they're
we
able
don't,
to do that.
we don't have any control over it. I just don't watch them. I mean, why would I? I
Yeah,
think
you've lived
the
it for
problem
years.
with monsters is, you know, the problem with monsters is that it's so well done, right?
It's
So I
very well
hear.
done.
So I hear. I watched a few scenes. I've had Cooper Koch has reached out to me, and we're in contact, and he's lovely. So I did go watch that part of episode 5. So I was
I
able
haven't
to
gotten that far
tell
yet.
him.
I think that at least what I've seen so far, Erik is portrayed very nicely, like very sensitive, but
Hmm.
they look, like I said, they make Lyle look like a raving lunatic. But
Right.
I will give you a warning. If we get the podcast thing set up with the show and we talk about Hollywood, if it's that one, you're probably going to have to watch it begrudgingly.
We'll
Just
see.
just so you know, because
I
well,
know.
the purpose of doing it though would be to tear it apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and be like, because the goal of it is to try to hold Hollywood more accountable and making these stories. Because the thing about it is I get it. Hollywood's here to entertain. That's what they want to do. Netflix wants to make something that's entertaining. But the thing about it is oftentimes these stories, this story in particular is one of those. You don't need to sensationalize it for it to be interesting. It's already interesting by itself. Two, young guy, good-looking guys from Beverly Hills. Father's a high up executive in the music industry. All of that's already there
Right.
for you to be able
Right.
to put together a great show without you having to completely falsify who the people are. And they
Right.
choose to do that on purpose. And so that's kind of what the goal of Real Victims is to basically like let's try to make them more accountable and let people who think like, hey, this is what they really were, let them know from the family's own voice or even the victims or survivors' own voice that this is not accurate and Monsters is not accurate. So,
Yeah.
but the one document, the documentary just called the newest one that's on Netflix? Is that one just
Yeah,
Menendez?
that one was pretty good,
It's
right? That one
great.
was pretty good. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
I I
That was
think
much more accurate, and you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be a puff piece to be accurate. I'm not looking for, I mean, I would love it, but I don't actually mind dissenting voices. Like, I get it. I get it. I usually welcome the chance to talk to them, because oftentimes those dissenting voices are just simply coming from a place of a lack of knowledge. And
yeah.
so if I can help educate them both on the crime, on Eric and Lyle, then also on trauma and trauma responses, so that we help them understand, so that they have a more nuance, because this is a nuanced topic, and I get it. Not everybody, has lived their life as me, right? So I don't mind if you interview the original investigators who are still against them.
Of course.
That's fine. That's fine. It's okay. As long as it's fair and balanced, and you're looking at the whole situation, and you're actually talking to real people.
Yeah, but and I think and I agree with you. I think they did a great job with that documentary showing all sides.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was 7, I think, when everything happened, and so the second trial was what 93, 94.
The second trial was in, I want to say 95, 96.
So,
The first
yeah,
one
so I
was
was
in
13,
93.
14 when that happened. So I remember a little bit, I wasn't really paying that much attention to the news. So, you go back and watch it and you're like, oh, either I forgot that or, oh, I didn't know that. And I thought that it was really powerful. I would encourage anybody, if you're in this live, watching and learning about this, and if you've not seen the documentary the documentary, not the show, but the documentary on Netflix, which is just called Menendez, watch it because
Yeah.
you actually get to see them in their testimony in the courtroom. And if you doubt them after seeing that testimony, then let's have that conversation. But I don't think you
Right.
will. But Monsters, when you're talking about that, they're not interviewing anybody. It is literally just an entertainment piece.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And the problem is the production value is so high
It's
that
very good.
people watch it and they go, "Oh, they treat it like a documentary." They're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
so that's that's all of it."
Even the actor they got to play Eric was like it looks a lot like him. They did
Oh
it.
gosh, yeah, he does.
Yeah, they did a good job on it.
Yeah,
Eric not so much. So,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Lyle not so much. I meant.
Lyle, yeah. I didn't
Uh,
think Nick Chavez looked like Lyle.
but this is also one of the reasons why I've been like, you know, gunning to do this with you because like there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much talk around this. There's so much support, and I love the ability to help correct information for those of y'all who for those of the people in here um, who are willing to listen and learn.
Yeah,
Is this true? Was it after that came out? Was Milli Vanilli really back on the charts?
yeah. I think so. I
That's
think
it's
so.
that to me is like the funniest thing is that and I had to
I
Google like, is this true? Did he really play Milli Vanilli at the funeral? And I was like, okay, apparently it's true. And
I was at the funeral in Princeton, and there was no DJ. We had
well, but
it
did
was
they still
very
play the song? Because the internet says they played the song. Did they not play it, or because you were
not at
there?
the funeral.
Okay,
There was an event in LA where I
okay,
believe the song was played, but not at the funeral.
okay. So that's kind of so they made like that event look like the funeral. I think,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where they kind of blended it together.
Right.
So this is a great question we haven't talked about. So have y'all as the family spoken to the band member from Menudo who came out?
Well, I haven't, but the lawyers have.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's part of the habeas corpus. So
Okay.
we have the habeas is still going on in the background. We just filed our response to their response. If you remember last in the winter, uh, DA Hockman came out and did a big press conference. What a shit
Yeah, I
show that
remember.
was.
I remember.
Decided it was really
Like this
bad.
guy.
Instead of just filing paperwork, which is what he was supposed to do, decided to, get in front of a bunch of cameras. So, we just this week, last week, filed our official response to that. So now that goes in front of Judge Ryan, and we don't know. There's no Judge Ryan is not on a timeline. So at any point he can say, okay, he can dismiss it, say nope, not good enough, right? I don't see any compelling arguments here, and dismiss the habeas. Or at any point he can say, okay, I want to have a hearing on this, and I want the DA to start responding to these to these points here. I believe that is all public information, so you can
Yeah.
go read our response to
Or
their
if it's
response.
if it's filed, yeah, it's public. That's not, yeah. So
It's
we
filed,
can,
yeah.
yeah. I'll see if I can maybe find that, and that might be interesting to do a
So
thing
Roy
on.
Rosello is part of that. So he
Okay.
already did a deposition with our lawyers, and so that's in that packet.
Without having to necessarily name anybody, have there been other people since then come forward, or not really?
No, not really.
Okay.
There are some rumors floating around about other members of Menudo. It wouldn't surprise me. No one else has come forward, and I always like to caution people not to. No one should feel pressured to
Yeah.
come forward with allegations of abuse before they're ready, because that is an incredibly personal, traumatic thing. And then to go, I mean, our family, we're the circus. Not everyone wants to join the circus,
Yeah.
So
But I think, yeah, I think it's interesting because I have a feeling that them coming forward and the new evidence coming forward, um, kind of helped him to come forward, and
absolutely.
so I think that's really. Oh, that's somebody asked a question about Jose and Kitty. Do you know the story about where they met or
I
how they
don't
met? I guess.
remember where they met. I think they met when my uncle was still in college. So he went to Queens College. Uh, she's a couple of years older than him, um, 2 or 3 years older. It was scandalous at the time, I think, because he was 19 and she was 22 or something like that. But I'm not sure. I don't remember. I don't remember the story of how they met.
Okay, somebody asked that. That's a kind of a good
Yeah.
question. What other questions do you guys have for her while we're here? I love doing. You're very articulate in talking about this,
Thank
and
you.
very passionate. I just love it.
Thank you.
Um, so what else do you guys have for her? As long as, again, you can ask even the tough questions or maybe the uncomfortable ones, as long as you're respectful about it. She said she's not scared. Well, do you get to do face-to-face meetings with them ever?
With Lyle and Erik? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just there 2 weeks ago, right before the resentencing, which was on a Tuesday. I had spent that weekend with them at R.J. Donovan in prison. Um, so yeah, I do, and it's there. This dog,
I love this
it
dog.
only does this when I'm on TikTok lives. By the way,
He's
it's
an
his
attention
favorite
whore.
thing. Literally every time I'm on TikTok live, he has
Something
to be part of it.
I love this question. I think you will too. What is your favorite thing about Erik and Lyle?
Oh gosh.
I think that's a great
Um,
question.
my favorite thing about Erik, well, first of all, Erik and I are uh, very much alike. Like, we look alike. We're both meditation teachers. We're both artists. Like, we are really alike in every possible
Very
way.
kindred
So,
spirits.
kindred spirits. So I love talking to him about. Uh, I love sharing stories about meditation and the work that we've done with people, and he's just so. He's so smart. He's so funny. Um, he's such a good soul. Good soul. And Lyle, I mean, Lyle and I really share life. I talk to him several times a day, and I love his sense of humor. I love that he loves gossip. Like he can really get into like,
And I get
you know,
that. So,
he's like, all right, like with my kids, he's like, okay, who's so and so dating? I got it. Like, give me all the deets. Like he wants he wants all of that stuff. So, they're very different from each other, but they're both fantastic.
People, sorry, a lot of questions. I'm going to go back through and do this. What do you feel the family was treated well by prosecutors during? I guess I think you mean the hearings, not trial. But how do you feel prosecution has treated y'all?
Um, During the trials, the actual trials, it was horrible. The way they treated my mother was pretty terrible. Uh, During the most recent hearings, uh, I mean, fine. I got pretty beat up during that resentencing hearing, which
I
I
thought it
told you
was.
about.
I I figured I was going to say terrible based on the fact that they tried to re-traumatize y'all with pictures.
I mean, I think I think they lost sight of the fact that we are victims of this crime also. And just because they're not used to dealing with victims that are like, it was very strange to be in the courtroom, right? Because usually, like, we were sitting behind the defense, the victim's family, because essentially, even though the prosecution, right, they introduced themselves, right? I'm Nathan Hoffman for the people. I'm Habib Valiant for the people. For what people?
Not y'all.
Not for us
For other
people.
people.
So
For
usually
other
you have the
people.
victims seated behind the prosecution, and we were actually seated behind the defense because the prosecution was so adversarial to us simply because we wanted to see them out, Lyle and Erik. So it's been a brutal process for us. I'm glad that part is over.
I don't think you know this question, but I'll ask you anyway because I think it's part of the negotiations. But if they get released, would they go to a halfway house first, or do you know if they live with a relative?
Yeah, those decisions haven't been made. That's
Yeah, I didn't think so.
that's a negotiation we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Here's a question for me. Hey, this is the one that's kind of been like blowing my mind. I even talked to Laziza about it today. When they were arrested in 1989, right? That's 30
Yeah,
years.
1990. Yeah.
They were arrested. Not was it? Oh yeah, because it was after the holiday. Yeah. So it's been 1989, right? That's 30
Yeah,
years.
1990. Yeah.
They were arrested. Not was it? Oh yeah, because it was after the holiday. Yeah. So it's been so they've been in jail prison for 35 years. The world of 1990 is like does not exist at all, and I know that they're not years. The world of 1990 is like does not exist at all, and I know that they're not, it's a huge. The world is vastly different than when they went in.
I think that, and again, they do have TVs and they see
Yeah,
movies. It's not like they're,
you
walking
can
out of a
see it.
cave and have never seen like electronics before, right? So what I worry the most about them is that they have never lived in an age of social media. They have never seen how quickly people can get canceled, and you have to watch everything you say, you have to watch everything you do. They are going to be under a microscope when they get
I will
out,
tell
and I
you
I worry so much about that. That's my biggest concern with them.
that's incredibly valid. And my on that is when they get out, because again, I'm putting it out there. Um, Keep them off social media till they know what they're doing, because they will be. It'll be because I think that they're going to like it. It's the attention. It's great. It feels. But I think that, like you said, people can be really quite brutal, and you can get
Yeah,
canceled like that. And I think
yeah,
that when they get out, they need to be very cautious on the way that they handle their social media presence. In fact, they need a person
yes, I agree.
to run that
I
for them.
agree. Yeah,
So,
I agree.
um, so yeah, I think yeah, social media will be very interesting because even the internet, like I'm sure they use it, but again, it's very restricted on what they can do.
Exactly. It's very different from what we experience. And I also hope that uh, I I hope that the parole board, you know, when, because it's no longer if they get released, it's
It's out
when.
there.
We don't know if
Put
it's
it
this
out
year or
there.
next year or the year after, but when they get released, I hope they take into consideration security, that they are going to need security. I wish I
Is
could
that
say that
something that
everybody was rooting for them, but not everybody is rooting for them. So,
is that something I didn't know that was a thing you could get with
well, I think
security?
that'll have to be negotiated. I mean, obviously, not everybody is them,
Yeah.
right?
Fair. So this is a good, interesting question. What do you think of Lyle having narcissistic traits according to the risk assessment? And before you answer, I'm going to say, for the record, everybody's got some narcissistic traits.
Yeah, that's
Everybody.
right. So first of all, a couple of things on this. Right. The reason the CRA is not is not supposed to be used in a resentencing, and Hochman decided to bring it in, even though like literally 10 minutes before that he had sworn up and down to the judge in chambers that he wasn't going to read from the CRA because it wasn't allowed to be because the people who write the CRA, right, they spent a few hours with him, literally like 3 hours with him, right? Talked to him for 3 hours. It was two people who wrote that report, and they can't be cross-examined by a lawyer. Well, why did you write that? What about that? What about that made you say that he has no? You can't. You can't rebut it. You can't bring in a witness and say, well, I actually also evaluated him, and that's not the case, right? So
No.
that's why the CRAs, you have to take them with it. That's why they don't belong in a resentencing hearing, because they're a very small part of the parole process. So it was wildly inappropriate for him to bring that in. Okay. So with that said, that is one person's opinion after talking to him for a few hours. The second part of that is that he was not diagnosed as a narcissist, right? He had some narcissistic qualities. I think he tries to be charming, and sometimes people see that as narcissistic.
Gotcha.
He was nervous.
So a therapist typically does the CRAs. Is there any? This is just my own curiosity here. Was what he did like a HIPAA violation at all, or is it not really because they're in prison?
Yeah, no. Yeah,
okay.
You lose those kinds of rights. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure. That's because it just seems like putting everything out there is just. It wasn't
appropriate. It just wasn't appropriate because it's not relevant for resentencing. It's relevant for parole.
Yeah, it was a shitty move.
It was a shitty move. He did it on purpose.
Yeah, he is making his opinions very clear that he does not want them out. And I don't like, it's almost like it's personal for him.
I don't understand. For the life of me, I do not understand. So California as a state places a really high priority in non-recidivism, right? So they are constantly trying to, even if you look at, Nathan Hochman's social media, right? He goes to prisons, and it's all about rehabilitation. And, we believe that the correctional institutions of California should be about rehabilitating people. If you actually believe that, like if you really, really believe that, why would you not put Erik and Lyle up as examples of rehabilitation and tell other inmates, like, hey, you want a shot of getting out? This is what you have to do. Right? This is the work that you should be doing. It's almost personal. I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't get it.
I'm sure it's politically motivated, but I agree. The thing is, I would say that probably more young people who are paying attention to this support their release than don't. And yes, we know that the older generations might not. But when you're looking at trying to move higher up in politics, you need voters. Well, the older, I hate to put it, I'm just going to be very blunt with this. The older voter base is dying. The younger voter base is not. So when you have somebody like this, because like you said, they could be the poster kid, like poster children. They're not kids, but you know what I mean. The poster children for rehabilitation. And instead of doing it that way, you're just, it looks, and I'm being very, very unbiased when I say this because I've covered a lot of cases and talked about a lot of things. It looks petty at this point, what he's doing. It doesn't even look like he's trying to do it for any other reason. Like he's not like this whole thing with the accountability. Like they have to be accountable. They have to admit they have. And that's well documented over the last 30 years. That's well documented. And it's like, so why, like this is like you're treating them like children when the stuff is there, you're just, why are you doing that? And I know you don't know this, but like, why are you doing this? Like, what is your motive here? and
Yeah.
it makes no sense, especially when you had Gascon was just like, I think if Gascon was there, they'd probably already be out.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
I don't
even
know.
during the resentencing, which is largely about rehabilitation, it's about, in fact, when we sat down as a family with Gascon's administration, we sat down with the resentencing unit before he made the official recommendation. And, as a family, we sit down with them and they say, we're considering recommending resentencing, but we want to hear from you. You guys are the victim's family. And we had family members sort of pipe in and immediately start to say, they were abused. We know they were, we believe them. And they were just like, stop. Resentencing actually isn't about that. It's about their lives post conviction. What have
Interesting.
they done?
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it was such a wild 180 when the new administration came in, and all they wanted to talk about was the crime itself. Even at the resentencing hearing, all they wanted to talk about was the crime and like the trials. They wanted to relitigate the trials. They spent no time. They didn't want to discuss rehabilitation at all because, of course, if you talk about rehabilitation, then you don't have a leg to stand on. You're trying to keep them in prison. But it was really, it was just baffling to us as a family, going from the whiplash, going from one administration to the other.
Yeah, that's I didn't know that. So that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
That wow. So, but then the judge was like, got to basically overrode him and said, "We're doing this anyways," which I thought was great. And then
Yeah.
during the resentencing, what I thought was really interesting. So I was covering so that day because I'm like, I got dual screens right here, and I'm covering the start of Diddy and jury selection, and then I've got like for the live updates, and then I've got Menendez updates right here, and then I see what happens, and I know she's busy, but I call Aziza anyways. I'm like, I was telling her, I was like, I know that I don't like I don't know them, and I'm just like been covering this, but it gets to a point where you get so deep into it that you feel personally like you have emotion when a decision is made. And so that's kind of where I was at. I was like, oh my God, they're getting reset. But it was supposed to be 2 days. So when it came down later that same evening, I was shocked. But there was a judge that came in and spoke on their behalf.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Judge Colby.
so what's Judge Colby's relation to the brothers? Or like, why
So
did he
he has
speak?
so Judge Colby knows them because he has a therapy dog, a golden retriever, a much better behaved golden retriever than Chad
In
here
your,
in my room. Uh, so he has been visiting R.J. Donovan with his past golden retriever and now with the new one for years. So he has known
okay.
Lyle and Erik for like
That's
10 years
awesome.
and sees them regularly. Yeah. So he was very happy. He was like a really tough on crime judge in Florida. So it was kind of a big deal to have him come in and say, like, I would welcome them working with me. I would love to have them, visiting prosecutors, organizations, and talking to them and talking about criminal justice. Like it was really powerful testimony.
To get a judge to support. That's huge.
And
And I
actually, the turning point for the judge, Judge Jessex, when he made his recommendation that he was going to recommend resentencing, um, one that he said that the thing that swayed him the most was actually a letter in their packet that was from a corrections officer in prison from them, who said, I've been a corrections officer for, I think he said it was like 28 years or something. I've never written a letter on behalf of any inmate seeking resentencing, but I have seen these two for years, and it's my honest opinion that their further incarceration would serve no purpose. And Judge
that's
Jessic
powerful.
was like, that means something from a corrections officer. So
That's
it was pretty
incredible.
powerful. Hmm.
Is that why it didn't go? Because they had slated 2 days for it. Was that why it didn't go into the second day? And he was just like, "I'm making this decision."
Garagos made the decision
That's
after. So I testified first, and then Tamara and Diane, and then Honore Brown, right? And no, then Judge Colby, and then X-rated Honore Brown. And I actually, we had a little break after Honore's testimony, um, and I ran into Mark Garagos in the hallway, and he was like, I think I'm gonna call it. I think we've done enough. I think that we've gotten the point across, and we're just gonna go into closing arguments. So, like, let's get this done today.
I liked
So I
his
was
Hail
like,
Mary though. His Hail Mary was pretty great. Like let's, but you know what? You miss all the shots you don't take. So
yeah,
why not?
that's right.
He was trying to get him like I forget exactly what he did, but it was like what was he tried to get him basically get them out that day, like to either dismiss
He
all the
tried to get
charges.
manslaughter. He tried to
That's
get
what it was.
manslaughter.
Tried to get them,
Yeah,
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 yeah, which they would have been out right away. So
and they would have been out right away. Yeah,
yeah, but good for him for trying. So
yeah.
somebody, yeah, one of my mods asked, "Are they?" I'm sure that they are. Yeah, this is a different question. Sorry. Are they ready to come home nervous or anxious? I'm sure they're ready,
I
but
think
yeah,
they. I I think that they are very measured in how they are right now. They've this has been a long 35 years.
yeah,
Their journey through the justice system hasn't always been great. So they're both very tempered in the way they look at time right now. They know that it's an uphill battle to get through parole. Only 19% of people get through parole on their first try in California, so they know that going in. Uh, but for them, when your life without parole, time works a little bit differently. So
yeah.
they're very patient. Yeah.
I think the difference too with this one though is typically when people go up for the parole board, they're not them. Like it's a big the issue the positive that they have. I guess it could be a negative too. Is that they're a very big name.
Yeah.
So and that does carry some weight. And another one. What was it recently that got Leslie Van Houten recently got out, and I don't think she was supposed to ever really be eligible, and she was. That was with the Manson family, and again, that becomes
Hmm.
a big name because it's infamous cases. So I'm hoping that it goes well. They've been in for a long time. And you got a lot of people in their corner, so that's
Yeah. I hope
yeah.
so. Fingers
1990 is a
crossed.
long time. Yeah, 1990 is a long time,
A long time. I know.
which makes me feel old, but it is. But it is. Um, is and I know that you've given me like an hour and 15 minutes, and I want to be cognizant of your time because I know you do have a lot of stuff that's on every day. So,
Hmm.
um, like I definitely want to do another one of these on YouTube or where we can go to the other platforms. I think that's good for you as well, and for people learning about their story. But is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you might want to tell
I
people?
think I think we this is a good start. Yeah.
I think this was a great start. This was
Yeah.
a lot of really good, interesting information. And we have almost 700 people in here now. And I would encourage you, if you don't already follow Anna Marie, please do. Her content's great. This is what she talks about. You go live pretty regularly,
I
so
do. I do.
so
Although sometimes I'm talking about, like, Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni.
well,
So if we're being
that's
honest.
very fascinating as well.
Yes.
I didn't, I couldn't get into that. I haven't gotten into that one myself because I got so deep into the Johnny Depp Amber Heard one, and I'm like, can I do another? That's actually so. My friend, fun story. My friend that where I told you about that works for Alice actually took this picture of Johnny Depp and then got Johnny to sign me. This was in California on a
Wow.
basically private tour of Alcatraz. So what was really interesting is when that was going on, Kyler would be like, yeah, he would tell me all this inside stuff about Johnny and Amber because he witnessed it firsthand when they were on tour with the Hollywood Vampires. And so I had people like, how did you
Wow.
know this? And I'm like, my best friend, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of like the jar of dirt that they kept talking about was the literal jar of dirt from the movie,
Oh my God.
actual jar of dirt. And, so it's just, and he apparently, when he does do his substances, is not violent at all. He's actually like a sloth.
Oh,
So
oh
that's
yeah.
kind of interesting too. And basically that she just brought out the worst in him. But this whole Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni thing, man, that's what a mess. It's
What
juicy
a
though.
mess. It
Juicy.
is juicy. I love it so much.
Yeah, somebody wanted to say this too, and I think she knows this, but please let her know that she has supporters with her. There's a lot of everybody in here has been. I haven't seen anybody. I've been kind of scanning the comments. I haven't seen anybody like showing anything other than support.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining me today, and thank you, Justin, for having me on. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your platform and letting me talk to people that I don't ordinarily get to reach. So I'm really grateful.
Anytime you want to, I'm always happy to do that. And I think too. probably making some connections with some other people that could help kind of further your cause for advocacy. I think that should be something that we have in the cards as well.
Yeah, let's do that.
So,
Let's do
all right.
that.
Well, I will talk
Sounds
to you
great.
soon. And yeah, thank you guys for coming on. If you missed part of this or want to see it, I will get this uploaded to YouTube. My channel's the same. Name is here, Just the Nick of Crime. And of course, like I said, again, if you just came in, follow Anamaria. It's Anamaria, sorry. It's Anamaria. It is,
No,
right.
Anamaria.
Got the first right. Yeah, follow her.
Yeah.
Great content. And we need to grow her platform. Are you on Instagram by chance also? Do you do
I
anything
am, but it's mostly yoga stuff.
So you could create, just so you know, you could create another one in any video that you upload on TikTok. All you have to do is copy what you type in the description and then go to Instagram and immediately upload it. And it takes like no time. And you can, that's what I mean. That's when I do a video. Nobody makes videos outside of TikTok, really, unless it's YouTube. You with your shorts, you do that, and then you put it on YouTube, you put it on TikTok, or you do TikTok first, you put it on Instagram or anywhere else. And it takes you literally minutes.
You're going to have to help me. You're going to have to help me.
That was a conversation that I had with Laziza today, too, is talking about your social media health. And I said, well, I'm happy to
Please help me. I'm old. I'm so new. I've only been doing TikTok since like October.
You're my brother's age. You're not that old. So my brother was born in 75. So I know you're right around that. So
71.
That's still right. That's still the neighborhood, right?
It is.
But yeah, I can help you because what you can do is you can do a Facebook page as well, separate for like a page, not just your profile, separate from your personal one, and then you can link it to your LinkedIn as well, or not your LinkedIn, sorry, link it to your Instagram as well, and then you have all the meta stuff. And I think that let me know when you have them. If you have a moment like tomorrow or even sometime, whatever, I can 30 minutes. I can walk you through everything you need to know.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Justin.
Well, everybody have a great night. Follow her, and thank you all for being so great during this conversation. And you can catch it on YouTube if you missed it, and we'll do another one there at some point in the near future.
All right. Bye.
Bye.